What single human has done the most damage to the progression of humanity in the history of mankind? Op is compiling a hit list for their time-traveling journeys.
Sheikh al-Islam. I heard of this guy after hearing someone on TV complain about how this man set the Islamic world back by centuries. In 1515, the age of the Ottoman Empire, he, a learned scholar of the kingdom, issued a decree that forbid printing, press, and made using it punishable by death. Edit, grammar, more context.
Purportedly, the unnamed inventor of flexible glass, Vitrum Flexile, brought a drinking bowl made of the material before Tiberius Caesar. The bowl was put through a test to break it, but it merely dented, rather than shattering. The inventor repaired the bowl easily with a small hammer, according to Petronius. After the inventor swore that he was the only man alive who knew the manufacturing technique, Tiberius had the man executed. He feared that the glass would devalue gold and silver, since the material might be more valuable.
The Ottoman caliphs who banned the printing press from the Muslim world. That's exactly how you destroy a civilization.
Bakhtiar Khilji, hands down. In 12th century there was the world's biggest university in India named Nalanda, where intellectuals from all around the world used to study. Then Turks invaded India under Khilji. They killed almost all the intellectuals and destroyed the university. And they burnt the library. The library continued to burn for 3 months. This has to be by far the biggest loss to mankind. Emo.
A lot of people don't seem to understand the question. It's not who did bad thing or who I hate more. It's who hindered the progress of humanity the most.
Guy de Chauliac. He was a surgeon in the 1300s who vehemently spoke out against another fellow surgeon, Theodoric Borgonani. Theodoric was a surgeon who wrote about his theories on proper wound care and believed that the best thing you can do to a wound is wrap it and keep it clean. Guy hated what Theodoric was writing because it directly went against the teachings of Galen, an ancient Greek surgeon who believed pus was the body's way of balancing your humors. Guy's teachings were widely accepted, and it's believed that his ignorance set the development of antisepsis in surgery back about 600 years. Edit. Guy de Chauliac was born in the 1300s, not 1200s, as he was alive during the Black Death. Ignaz Semmelweis was the guy who was thrown into a mental asylum for saying surgeons should wash their hands between seeing patients.
Robert Maxwell, father of Ghislaine. The man was the leading cause of paywalled scientific articles today. Before him, science publishing was relatively open. He helped shape the industry into the cancer on academia it is today. Edit. Quite the thing to wake up to, thanks everyone. For those interested, I found an article that details the events pretty well. The Doctor version is that through use of PR marketing, exclusivity deals, and copyright law, Maxwell through Pergamon Press turned scientific publishing from a relatively non-profit-driven endeavor to a predatory industry that charged institutions out the nose for research they paid nothing for. Check out Alexandria and C-Hub. They've definitely helped many people who can't access scientific research. Video on C-Hub. Article.
That stupid fish that decided to leave water.
Yongle, emperor of the Ming dynasty in China, ordered the fleet of Zheng He, the greatest trading and exploration fleet of the time, to be burned during his reign in the early 1400s. This was the beginning of an era of isolation for Chinese kingdoms, which ultimately led to the collapse of Imperial China, and indirectly to the rise of the PRC. Additionally, the wealth of the world overall decreased as a result of reduced trade with China, and if China had continued exploring, it is possible that they, not Europeans, would have colonized North America, instead of merely maybe discovering it then telling no one as they did in history. It may not be a significant alteration of human progress, but it's one of those events that sets the world in a definitively different direction. Edit. Didn't say the Chinese did discover America. Just that they might have, because it's been theorized that they did and they had the technology. I mean, the Inuit and Siberians have been crossing the Bering Sea in leather kayaks for thousands of years, so the Chinese definitely could have done it too if they wandered up that far. I don't know much about the actual history of that theory, and most of my comments on that are from Wikipedia searches this morning and willingness to believe fun, hidden history, scenarios that are actually possible. Thanks for all the upvotes.
That monk who glued a page of geometry and algebra together to write prayers on it instead. Set the world of maths back about 300-400 years. Edit, here you go. A Greek monastery held the papers for a whole, then it was overwritten with prayers. Edit, while not whole.
I would suggest Andrew Wakefield. His work Ileal-lymphoid nodular hyperplasia, nonspecific colitis, and pervasive developmental disorder in children has been directly responsible for the mistrust of vaccines, the decline of Western rates of vaccination, and basically telling everybody that there's a boogeyman underneath your bed. He is directly responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths. He's a scientist who made a mistake. Why are you blaming him? It's not that he made a mistake. He had purposely customized the outcomes to meet the hypothesis so that he could get rich selling safe vaccines and diagnostic kits. He poisoned the well that saved so many people just so he could get rich. I have no idea how he can sleep at night.
There are two answers here, the ones who are serious and truly answer the question, and the ones who state some modern person they just don't like.
Thomas Midgley Jr. Almost everything he invented has seriously harmed humanity. With his inventions, Thomas Midgley Jr. contributed to the poisoning of 3 generations of children, increased the risk of skin cancer and other skin problems related to exposure to UV rays, and contributed greatly to global warming.
Nazir the Copper Merchant. Our first written texts could have been amazing accounts of how life was at the time. Instead they're just people giving bad reviews on Bronze Age Amazon.
Whoever gave the order to burn the Library of Alexandria?
Cyril of Alexandria is a pretty good bet. He organized murder squads to go around Alexandria killing anyone who wasn't a die-hard Christian. This included nearly every great mind of the era. One in particular was Hypatia of Alexandria, one of the greatest minds in history. She invented a working steam engine nearly a millennia before the first steam locomotive. He is of course considered a saint by Catholicism and the Church of England. Edit. It was Hero that invented the steam engine. Chill y'all, I just woke up to 100 damn replies. Her writing did survive, just not intact. Much of it within the treatise of Theon, her father a great astronomer in his own right. Wikipedia is not infallible.
Genghis Khan. While he personally didn't do much to hinder human progress, his reign began an era of Mongol expansionism and devastation, and his successors were responsible for the destruction of the House of Wisdom of Baghdad, ending the Islamic Golden Age, and not to mention the destruction of numerous cities and the deaths of many. Also, the Mongol Empire eventually paved the way for the Black Death. The empire led to many trade routes being formed between Europe and Asia, which eventually led to the transmission of the Black Death to Europe in the 14th century.
Bad history as far as the eye can see.
Sir Mark Sykes. This man was the British element in the Sykes-Picot Agreement. For those of you not in the know, 100 years ago the Middle East was an area that did have some nations and some more tribal areas. So people were more divided by language and culture, some by religion. France and Britain decided to carve up the Middle East into easier to govern territories, but fumbled this task and instead divided the territories on the map over these religious and tribal lines. Not only has this been a main contributing cause of conflict in the Middle East, if you take 2 opposing or rival groups and then suddenly group them as one country, what do you expect? But said conflicts have then fueled further conflicts again and again. This has then been further used by Islamic extremists as a reason to hate the Western powers, as they were the ones who created this terrible agreement. Even Sykes himself accepted that the agreement's wording should be changed in order to give those countries autonomous rule. What is a little sad is he actually seemed to want to help these regions with the agreement, but just bumbled the whole thing, which has led to most of the issues the Middle East has to this day. Sykes didn't make the modern Middle East though, he just played a large part in creating the circumstances in which its current problems thrive. Imagine all of the advancement, education and collaboration that could have happened had the Middle East been allowed to flourish unhindered and without resentment.
Edward Bernays. He created modern-day PR, which set the blueprint on how to control the masses by deception.
Because of the butterfly effect, ugh. If Ugg hadn't hit Bog with that rock in 20000 BC, we'd be a galaxy-spanning utopian civilization by now.
There's an awesome podcast called Behind the Bastards that is basically all about deconstructing the worst people in history. Would recommend it to anyone interested in this thread.
Thomas Midgley Jr. in 1921, This guy that discovered that tetraethyl lead could be used as an anti-knocking fuel additive for cars. It satisfied the needs of oil companies at the time, because it worked, was cheap, and was patentable, for that purpose. But it was also incredibly toxic, and burning leaded gasoline was hugely pollutive. Eventually, after the creation of the EPA and an oil crisis in the mid-70s, leaded gas was banned in 1996, but the damage was done. Interestingly, the guy didn't even show up for the occasion when the first customer filled up their car with leaded gas, because he was at home, sick with lead poisoning.
Up there would be Diego de Landa, who burned all of the Mayan books in the name of Christianity, on July 12, 1561.
The Exxon scientists who first learned of man-made climate change in the late 70s and chose to cover it up.
Bakhtiar Khilji, just a beep who destroyed Nalanda University, which was one of the oldest and most fascinating educational places in ancient India. The library kept burning for 6 months. Just imagine the amount of knowledge those books would have and how much impact they could have in the modern world.
The Mongolians, army of Hulagu, when they destroyed Baghdad's libraries that contained many of the past knowledge that set back humanity years.
Thomas Midgley Jr. single-handedly reduced the IQ of the entire nation of the U.S. due to airborne lead poisoning from his invention of leaded gasoline. Then, upon hearing it was dangerous, launched a campaign to point out how it wasn't dangerous. He is responsible for 7 million tons of lead being put into the atmosphere between the years of 1922 to 2000, when leaded gasoline was finally banned worldwide. Not satisfied with his destruction of air quality, however, he then went on to invent Freon, which punched a hole in the ozone layer some 40 years later. Truly, this man's war on human lungs and quality of life is unmatched.
Andrew Wakefield. The man nearly single-handedly created the anti-vaxxer craze with false and erroneous studies linking vaccines to autism.
May your day be filled with joy and happiness. And please remember to subscribe to Upvote for the best quality content every day.